Howdy y'all, and welcome back to another William Carter's Wild West production. It's a relatively warm Thursday afternoon on September 7th, 1876. Just before 2 o'clock, 8 riders ride up towards Mill Square, Northfield, and, without a word to anyone, begin sorting themselves outside of the First National Bank. 3 men instantly peel for the front door, those being Frank James, Charlie Pitts, whose alias was Sam Wells, and Bob Younger. 2 other robbers, Cole Younger and Clell Miller, hover right at the entrance, shoulders squared to the street. The remaining 3, Jesse James, Jim Younger, and Bill Chadwell, whose alias at the time was Bill Stiles, remain in the square to keep eyes on the only way out of Northfield at the time, a solitary bridge crossing the Cannon River northwest of town. The door swings open, and Clell Miller closes it right behind them, opting to remain outside. Inside, acting cashier Joseph Lee Haywood looks up with teller A.E. Bunker and assistant bookkeeper Frank J. Wilcox nearby. Pistols are drawn nearly instantly. The demand from the 3 robbers is simple. Open the safe and open it now. Haywood says that he isn't the cashier and that the vault is on a time lock. It cannot be opened now. A shot blasts into the plaster overhead, and in that rush, one of the robbers tries to crowd into the vault mouth. Haywood lunges and tries to slam the door, a desperate move to trap him. He's yanked back, beaten down with a pistol, and was even reported to have been cut across the neck. Though it hurts and it definitely bleeds, the wound is not fatal. The room quickly turns hot with shouting. At that same instant, merchant J.S. Allen steps up to the front of the bank to try and see what's happening. Clell Miller meets him almost immediately. He grabs his coat front, shows a pistol, and shoves him back off with an unheard threat. Allen peels away and runs up the street, desperately trying to warn the town, shouting his now famous plea.
Get your guns, boys! They're robbing the bank!
His words immediately spring the town into action. Men dive into Scrivers and the nearby hardware stores for rifles and shotguns, while others take the stairs 2 at a time to upper floor windows that command the bank front. On the street just outside of the bank, Elias Stacy swings his shotgun up at close range and fires, first at Clell Miller. Birdshot peppers his face and upper chest, effectively disorienting him. The situation quickly unravels as the first shot rings out. Above the street, Henry M. Wheeler, a medical student, has found an old single-shot Smith carbine at the Dampier house. He shoulders into an upper-story window, draws a bead at Clell Miller below, and fires. The bullet strikes him in the left breast, and Miller goes down for good. Wheeler works the carbine again and sends another round that catches Bob Younger in the arm, which tears up his right elbow. Across the way, hardware man A.R. Manning has slid into cover with a rolling block rifle and begins picking his shots. One of his earliest balls punches into the neck of Bob Younger's horse and drops the animal onto the ground dead. Manning reloads, waits, and when the angle opens, he delivers a shot right into Bill Chadwell's chest, killing him. Another shot rips through Cole Younger's hip, but Cole keeps moving. Inside the bank, the chaos doesn't even begin to let up. Bank teller A.E. Bunker spots a possible exit at the back and bolts for the rear door. Charlie Pitts fires and the bullets rip through his shoulder, but somehow the teller keeps his feet as he staggers into the alley and finds help for his wound at a local doctor's office. Wilcox stays put and, in turn, stays alive. In a heroic stand of wits, Joseph Lee Haywood steadies himself and repeats the same line. The vault is on a time lock. It will not open. Out on Division Street, gunfire comes from ground level and elevation, and people are scattering in every direction. In the chaos, Nicholas Gustafsson, a newly arrived Swedish immigrant, runs towards the intersection and is subsequently struck in the head. He will end up dying days later. Back inside the bank, the vault, it still won't open, and Joseph Haywood will not yield. In those final seconds before they break, out of desperation, an unknown robber puts a pistol to Haywood's head and fires, killing him instantly. Mr. Haywood dies protecting the townspeople money and is subsequently coined as Northfield's hero. The 3 men burst out into a street that is now degraded into a scene of all-out warfare. The mounts are skittering and lead balls snap off brick and hitch rails. Bob Younger, now on foot with a ruined elbow and no horse, scrambles up behind Cole and begins riding double just to get clear. The retreat down Division is a hailstorm. By the time they bend toward the Dundas Road, every surviving outlaw is shot or wounded in some way. Frank James and Charlie Pitts are both shot in the right leg. Bob Younger's elbow is shattered and his horse lay dead. Cole is shot through the hip, and Jesse James is hit in the thigh during the escape. South of town, near Dundas, the gang cuts a team and forces a fresh mount into service as Bob can't ride double for long in his condition, and so they continue to push on. Now, let's cut back to what remains in Northfield. Two outlaws, Clell Miller and Bill Chadwell, lie dead on Division Street. In the bank, Joseph Haywood is beyond help with a gunshot wound to the head. A.E. Bunker, the teller who was shot through the shoulder, will live. Gustafsson, the Swedish immigrant, will not. Within minutes, citizens in hastily raised posses are in the saddle and moving both south and west. Over the next 2 weeks, they'll run the remnants to near pieces, and on September 21st, in Hanska Slough, south of LaSalle, Minnesota, Charlie Pitts is killed in a shootout. Now, in that same shootout, Jim Younger takes a bullet right to the mouth, and his jaw is effectively shattered. He'll eat from a straw for the rest of his life. Despite this, Jim, Cole, and Bob Younger will be captured alive, however, and in due course plead guilty. Only Jesse and Frank James slip the law and are able to ride out of Minnesota as free men. In result, however, the James Younger gang as a working unit dies in Northfield, and the First National Bank never loses so much as a cash drawer. The vault never opened. All thanks to the heroic actions of acting cashier Joseph Lee Haywood and his undying loyalty to both the bank and the townspeople of Northfield. And now, fast forward to the present day, and Northfield holds annual celebrations to commemorate the town's success in chasing off the James Younger gang. Though it has certainly been decades of the James Younger gang being reenacted and depicted in modern pop culture, one has to beg the question: what did the robbers really have on for clothing during the Northfield bank raid in 1876? Now, before this question is answered, there's a few good things to know about the fashion during that time in order to get a much better idea of what they would have been wearing. Of course, this is customary in all my videos, and I hope to get some kind of informational screen or photo put in so I don't just repeat this every single time. But I digress. In the 1870s, more specifically in 1876 when the raid occurred, mainstream coats still had low 2 to 3 button openings and favored wide lapels, sometimes featuring a velvet upper collar for more of a formal look, which we'll see a ton in the following information. Waistcoats came in various shapes and openings, the popular choice being shawl collar or collarless waistcoats. The notch collar waistcoat came in a close third, and pretty much all these opened either high or low in the torso. They could come with wide lapels as well, and could be seen single or double-breasted. One detail I like to add in every time is that the collars on the lapels wrapped all the way around the neck, and they don't just end at the shoulder seam. That was more of a 1920s thing. Another thing is that the armholes of these waistcoats are also much narrower than today's modern counterparts. Pants in 1876 were still fairly wide-legged and boot-cut, favoring that nice drape over the shoe's front and heel. Victorian trousers were high-waisted, sitting roughly at or above the belly button, and they did not have belt loops until after the turn of the century. Now, shirts in 1876 certainly had collars, but one very popular fashion trend of the time was the band-collared shirt, and you'd often see it fashioned with 2 buttons for the closure on the neck. And this could be seen in countless photos during the time, and it's also an important detail, as nearly every single member of the gang we're about to look at is wearing some version of it. And checked and plaid patterns on these shirts were also very popular, but we'll see that momentarily. Now, we're about to get into what these robbers were wearing, and since we don't have concrete evidence on their full outfits, I'll be pulling my hypothesis from fashion plates, catalogs, and their mugshots at the time. The only 2 robbers that had their photo taken on the day of the robbery were Clell Miller and Bill Chadwell. They were both killed in the street. So, it should also be known that when these photos were taken for the others, they had been on the run for 2 weeks since Northfield's botched robbery. Cole, Jim, and Bob Younger do have a few photographs which feature them wearing roughly 2 to 3 different outfits. The ones they had on during capture and their outfits during trial. It's unknown which one exactly they had worn during the raid, or if they wore them at all and rather picked them up after their escape, or just changed out, but I find the latter unlikely, as I'm sure they were wanted men, which in assumption didn't allow for them to stay in towns such as Madelia for long. Now, to begin, we'll start with the infamous linen dusters the gang all wore while riding into town. the one that you might be most familiar with, the one that's the most popular in modern design. One account I found states that the gang wore matching dusters, but it's hard to confirm that independently. So what we do know is that this style of duster was worn by at least one of the gang members. A linen Inverness-styled coat. Inverness, the construction, it doesn't have sleeves underneath, so it's really just the cloak and then the, I guess the rest of the body. This coat was reportedly picked up from the street after all was said and done. If we aren't certain that they were all wearing matching ones, we can also pull a design from photos such as these, which showcase another kind of linen duster with sleeves and just a fold-down collar. Now, since I again wasn't able to find verifiable evidence claiming the gang all wore matching dusters, both designs would be safe to incorporate on the gang members. Now, as we get into the individual members themselves, the first robber we'll begin with would be none other than Cole Younger, who's photographed wearing a whopping 3 different outfits, or variations of it, throughout his capture and trial. Out of all the guys we're about to mention, he is the most fitted, and we're able to get a good idea of what he was wearing. His first outfit we see him in is more of a light or midweight wool flannel or wool twill-esque suit, one that's quite dark in color, featuring a very subtle plaid or Glen check pattern. His waistcoat seems to match the coat, so for the sake of it, I'll assume it was a matching 3-piece. His shirt is a classic 1870s band collared pullover with a double button neck closure and wide placket, featuring 2 more closure buttons separated considerably down the placket. Due to similar features this shirt shares with other shirts seen in the 70s, we can also infer that the bottom of his placket is rounded rather than squared off. His waistcoat seems to be single-breasted with a lapel that rounds at the bottom, so I'd also like to infer that he's wearing a single-breasted shawl collar waistcoat underneath. For his design, I searched through fashion plates from 1874 to 1876 and was able to find quite a close match to his coat's construction, one from John Williamson's Summer of 1875 plate. And for this, we used it as the reference for the illustration, and we just built off of that. Now, for the color, this one was a bit difficult, as lighting and image degradation make it nearly impossible to tell from a photo, and even if you tried to color spot it confidently. To work my way around this unique issue, I used an 1875 Montgomery Ward catalog to discern what kinds of colored suits were marketed during the time. The main colors I found were black, blue, gray, and brown, of course, so I put on my thinking cap and looked at Cole's mugshot once more. His suit looks to be dark, real dark, so I figured black, brown, or blue would work just fine, and we just settled on navy blue just on account of how prolific blue dye was back then. But, of course, the other colors were also very likely. There's also no evidence to support that he wore any kind of tall riding boots tucked into his pants, so we omitted it from the design just to be safe as well. Now, for his second photo, he wears the same thing, but now with a heavier woolen overcoat on his person. And for this, we would also try to find a match, maybe make an illustration out of it, but the way he's wearing it is quite difficult to put a pin on. So all we do know is the appearance of it, which just looks to be of a heavier broadcloth material. And last but not least, his third outfit. Honestly the coolest out of the 3, and one that will even include Jim Younger in as well, just because it works so effortlessly, and other than this, Jim has literally no outfits to go off of. Now, this photo is one taken of Cole at trial, or before he's about to go to trial. And note that he doesn't look like he's been wailed on as much now. And his fancy suit with a velvet upper collar in a lighter shepherd's tartan pattern. Now, what's interesting about this is, of course, Jim Younger was actually photographed wearing the same exact suit. Now, whether this was the dress code they had for the bank robbery or if it was just another outfit change, it's still quite an interesting coincidence. But I digress. Based on what we're able to see, Cole is wearing the same shirt he had on during his capture, so with this we can guess that this is an outfit the gang certainly had at their disposal, especially with how nicely it looks to fit them. We can't really tell what waistcoat Cole is wearing since it's open, but one look at Jim and we could tell that he's wearing a single-breasted shawl collar waistcoat, at least we think. If they truly are the same outfit, it most likely isn't any different for Cole's. For the illustration, finding the same kind of coat silhouette that would match theirs proved to be quite difficult. A lot of the ready-made fashion plates I looked through didn't really feature velvet upper collars on civilian morning coats like theirs. Not saying it didn't exist, but it just wasn't marketed like crazy, which makes me think they had them custom made or bought from somewhere with custom construction. Regardless, the closest I was able to find was actually the same coat shape I used for Cole's first outfit. And while this certainly is only a guess and could realistically be any other kind of coat with similar lapel construction, it's the closest we're able to pinpoint for now. As we move on to Clell Miller and Bill Chadwell, the first thing I noticed is that Clell wears pants with a darker base and slightly lighter, thicker stripes. Bill wears pants that look to be a simple, dark fabric. Because I can't see any kind of tall stovepipe boots over their pants, we omitted them from the design and instead drew up two concept illustrations on what they may have worn during the raid. We can infer a few things about the raid rather confidently based on what we've seen and read about that day. Both Cole and Bob Younger were seen photographed with overcoats, so we can assume that it did get fairly cold, meaning all of the gang most likely wouldn't be caught not wearing some kind of regular coat and or waistcoats. And since the gang were also enjoying the spoils of their conquests prior to Northfield, I also want to assume that they had the money to be able to purchase newer fashions. So we took a few designs from fashion plates in 1874 and 1875 respectively and applied it to their look. For Clell Miller, he was wearing striped pants and a dark fabric. Now, it very well could be part of a matching three-piece, like pinstripe suit, but in a lot of fashion etiquette manuals of the time, striped pants were typically paired with contrasting, dark, plain fabric coats and waistcoats, so we just figured we'll give him that as well. Now, it certainly isn't perfect, and just like for all of these designs, it could be such a far offshoot of what they truly did wear during the raid, but hypothetical, authentic design is much better than no design at all in my opinion. Now, in the same avenue of not knowing what they wore at all really, we have Charlie Pitts. Only two verified photos currently exist of him, one of him shirtless and one of him with his shirt on. What we are able to see him wearing is a banded collar with what looks to be only one button for the neck closure, but it could be possible that the other button is obscured by the slightly open placket. The placket looks to be squared at the bottom with two buttonholes for the full closure, which are separated fairly evenly. It doesn't look like he has any breast pockets either, as there's no mismatch patterning or distinguished openings that I'm able to see. The pattern looks to be a graph microcheck with a light base and slightly darker patterning. For him, we just sketched up a possible outfit he may have had on when he was killed. A simple shirt with period-appropriate pants in a dark color, as we genuinely have no other evidence available. And last but not least, we have Bob Younger, the youngest of the Younger brothers, ironically during their raid. His also is a bit tricky, but I was able to find two extra photos of him floating around. One is certainly him, he has a larger coat on in this photo, and one unverified photo of him I found off of his Wikipedia page. And due to these three being the only ones we have, we made two concept images of outfits he may have worn either on the raid or on the run. From his mugshot, we can discern a banded collar pullover, with a double button neck closure and at least two buttons on the placket itself. It features what looks to be micro dots in a dark color, which could have been realistically any color on the market, but since they look to be fairly dark, we just went with blue, once again on account of how prolific blue dye was for clothing. Now, based on this alleged photo of him, we could see him wearing a wide-brimmed hat with what looks to be an open crown, a plaid banded pullover, period pants, and stovepipe boots with cloth pull tabs, which is the only credible evidence we have that one of the robbers may have worn tall boots during the raid. But again, purely speculation. Now, this first design that you can see is based off of that outfit. The other, however, it was kind of a bombshell to me when I found it. I love the history behind the Northfield bank raid and have only ever seen the one photo of Bob with just a shirt on. But what I was able to find, however, looks to be an insanely rare second photo of him taken with what I assume is his overcoat. A few things that scream overcoat to me are what follows. The upper collar, made of velvet, looks to notch right below his clavicle area, whereas mainstream civilian coats of the time had their velvet collars notch at or above the clavicle. The wool looks to be quite thick, and the coat's lapel matches the design of various frock coats or overfrocks of the time. More specifically, this style of frock, originally seen marketed in their winter line of 1873 to 74. Moreover, the other frocks or overcoats seen advertised also have that upper collar notch that sits lower on the chest. And while I could also just be flat out wrong about all of this, to me it does make the most sense from a situational perspective. Due to this, we also designed a possible outfit he may have been wearing on the run, or again, during the raid itself, one that you can see here. Now, for Jesse and Frank James, we unfortunately have no existing photos of them during, before, or after the raid. We can assume they had on the same dusters as the other gang members, but that's about as far as our design for them goes. Now, one last piece of evidence I was able to scrounge up was this sketch of the raid itself when it was happening. I wasn't able to confirm if this was the sketch that was put out during the time period, but it gives us kind of a good idea on something often overlooked as well. Well, what kind of hats were they wearing? Right off the bat, we can see two downed robbers on the road, Clell and Bill, with no hats on or near their person. They also look to be wearing full three-piece suits, which may bolster our claim about the robbers wearing full suits further. If we follow the two men on horses with white coats as well, one in the middle and one on the right, the one on the right is wearing a taller crowned hat and a short curled brim. It's hard to tell if the top is flat or not, but this checks out, as civilian hats in the 1870s commonly had very tall crowns with much shorter brims. The other horseman wears a wide-brimmed hat with what looks to be an open crown as well. As for discerning the other robbers, the rest of it gets tricky. Of course, it's an interpretive piece most likely drawn out of memory or hearsay, so it's going to be difficult to know or even trust that this depicts the scene accurately. But again, it definitely gives us good information that might have been lost completely otherwise. Other honorable mentions for hat wearers is the horseman on the far left. He wears a wide-brimmed hat with a flat-esque crown, and the man shooting from under the stairs near the bank also wears an open-crowned hat. I'm unsure if these depict the robbers again, but it's worth mentioning. And unfortunately, that is all the readily known information I personally have on the outfits of the men who robbed the Northfield Bank in 1876. Now, if I learn anything more or get something terribly wrong, I plan to remaster this video. But until then, I hope you learned something from this. The next video I have planned is about the shirt that Billy the Kid wore, so stay tuned if that sounds up your alley. Also, feel free to join the Discord for further announcements on future videos or any other projects I might have. This is William B. Carter, and you're watching Fashions of the West. Thank you again, and until next time, goodbye.